Time for the latest edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. Thank you so much for tuning in. On this episode, it's a recap, update episode of one of my favorite parts of collecting music. A very specific one, and one which I'm happy to say I found out I'm not alone in doing this, but it is kind of an unusual one. Collecting classic rock 8-tracks. Not just any. I have to like the bands. I have to like the albums. And I've been doing it for a while now. With the internet, of course, has made it a lot easier than when I first started collecting in the early 90s, but I do want to make mention of some that I found that were either sent to me or I kind of found in the wild, as they say, which is becoming harder and harder if you've been collecting for any amount of time. You tend to see the same ones, if you see any at all, and you don't tend to see a lot of, in my opinion, good rock ones. So I thought I'd show you what I've, since the last time I kind of did one of these, which I think was last summer. Gotten a lot since then, so I'd go over some of the additions to my 8-track collection. On the latest Tim's Vinyl Confessions, Will, frequent co-host on the show, found this for me a while ago. It's a little beat up. It's Nazareth Razmanaz, a Canadian edition on A&M. And A&M 8-tracks were interesting because they actually had the cover art on the back, which is really rare. You don't see that a lot. So this is probably identical to the US edition, except for this white part on the bottom. So, thanks to Will for that one. Discogs. Bought a lot of stuff off Discogs. Not so much 8-tracks, but I did get this one. This is Yes, Close to the Edge. Pink Cart, US edition on Atlantic. eBay, of course. eBay has been the primary source for most of my 8-track collection, and I've gotten some really cool ones lately. Sometimes you got to buy a few, and you're going to get a few that you don't really want just to get some there. There was a package, or there was a set of them being sold. I didn't want them all, but I kept the spares. But I was able to use those to get some other 8-tracks I like. But the 5 that I kept out of this one particular pack, all good additions to my collection. One that I'm surprised I've never found, I've got a lot of April Wine 8-tracks and have never found their most successful one, so I had to resort to eBay. This is, of course, The Nature of the Beast. This is a US edition on Capitol Records. And side note, if you're a member of Discogs and you're keeping track of your collection that way, you can sometimes scan your releases in by using the barcode. Believe it or not, this actually worked. Scanning that barcode brought up this very US 8-track edition of Nature of the Beast. I thought that was kind of funny. Debut Foreigner on 8-track in 1977. A US Atlantic edition. Got a very special Foreigner episode coming up in the next few weeks on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Made some additions to my Journey 8-track collection. This is Infinity. Yeah, it's not in the best of shape, but I'm satisfied with it. It's a US edition, of course, on Columbia. Just looking to see if any songs repeated on here. Yes, Wheel in the Sky. It's on Program 2 in its entirety, and it splits up 3 and 4. Another Journey Evolution, another US copy. The customized logo that they used only on that album. You can see it again on the back here. And Kansas, 2 for the Show, their live album from 1978. This is, of course, the US edition. Another one that I got off eBay. This is an exciting one for me. It's one of my favorite bands and not one that you see on 8-track very often. It's pretty wrinkled, but of course this is Def Leppard, High and Dry. It doesn't say Columbia House anywhere on here, but this has to be a Columbia House issue. It just has to be because of the blue band around it. Also, I know what Mercury US retail 8-tracks look like, and this is not it. None of that matters. What matters is I have this classic album on 8-track. Would still like to find the 1984 reissue version, which is available mail order only. And this was cool. Don't have a lot from 1982 as we move along into the 80s, but this one came up on eBay and I couldn't pass it up. It's the album that gave the name of this show. It's Kansas Vinyl Confessions on 8-track. US retail edition. It's probably the last Kansas 8-track that was released to retail. I think if Drastic Measures came out, it would have been a mail order only. So I was excited to get this one. Speaking of exciting to get things, this is something that I never thought I'd find, especially in a Canadian edition. This is the Third Journey album, Next. Anything pre-Steve Perry's, pretty rare, but especially in Canada, where they weren't nearly as popular, and on 8-track at that. So I was very happy to get this off of eBay, and it's in pretty good shape too. Not a lot of bubbling going on, and the guy that sent this to me actually took the time to put this little protective casing on top of it, which is a nice touch. The one I was really excited to see when it came up, like, you know, we all have, if you're on eBay and Discogs, you have a want list, right? When something comes up, you check your email in the morning and you see, oh, there's an item in your want list. And that's always fun. So I couldn't pass this up. Bryan Adams, Cuts Like a Knife on 8-track. This is a U.S. Columbia House edition. Blue band around it marks it as a Columbia House issue. That's all that there would have been. I'm pretty sure that there wouldn't have been a retail A&M version of this. But this is really cool. You just don't think of Bryan Adams as an artist from the 8-track era, but here it is. And Reckless was too, and I'm sure some others. This is the only one I've been able to come across, so I was happy about that. Found some in the wild at Spin It back in, I believe, February. Very, very rare that I go to a store or go to any location to find 8-tracks that I'm looking for, but there was a few here that I had to pick up. This one's kind of rough. This is Best of Deep Purple, the Mark I Deep Purple. I've got this on record with the same cover. This is an edition on Polydor, and a Canadian edition. Side of it is in rough shape. You kind of have to guess where some of the letters were. And here is the back cover. Another Deep Purple one. I pulled the wrong one down. All right. Classic album, Machine Head. This is pretty beat up too. It's a Canadian edition, but Warner Brothers, and has that on it too. And my personal favorite Led Zeppelin album, In For the Outdoor, on 8-track. This is a Canadian edition. Was happy to get that. And I'm going to end off with some that I got sent to me from members of a Facebook group that I've been a member of now for a few months. It's called 8-Track Fixation. I'll post a link to it on the description of this underneath, so that if you're interested in collecting 8-tracks, I highly recommend joining this group. These are some guys that I traded some tapes with. Like I said earlier, I bought a bunch that had some I didn't want, but they came in handy as a trade. And first one I'll talk about, Vincent Moore. I made a trade with him. I think I traded him a spare of a Cheap Trick at Budokan, and he ended up sending me this one, Bad Company, Desolation Angels. I'd never had any Bad Company 8-tracks before, so that was cool. And James McGinty, made a couple trades with him, some spares, and out of that deal, I got REO Speedwagon. You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. I've always loved that album title. This is a U.S. edition on Epic. And one of my favorite bands, increased my 8-track count to 4, Queen, Live Killers. This is a U.S. RCA Music Service edition of their live album. So always happy to add to the 8-track collection, and you know, I'll be doing more of these as I amass a similar amount of 8-tracks. Got some good episodes coming up for the next few weeks. If you're a Kiss fan, got another Kiss episode coming up. Canadian, if you're into obscure Canadian bands from the 70s, I've got one coming up for you. And of course, got the Record Expo coming up at the end of May. We'll have a very special recap episode of that and beyond too. Just like to keep doing these episodes. Really appreciate the feedback and the comments. I may not respond to them all, but rest assured I do read them all. So thanks for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.